Okay, hi everyone. I think today we thought that we are going to talk about reverse engineering, and actually, this is a topic which I'm very excited about, specifically because when we talk about reverse engineering, there is no set steps or methodology that you can follow where you will be able to say that now it is done or now it is how much it is left. So we thought that we should talk more about it, and we should tell everyone about how we have done it, and share our experiences so that more people can do it, whosoever are listening. And I have brought with me Anup. So Anup and me have worked on a lot of such kind of studies over the period of last 10 years. Anup is actually, heads our infringement team, but infringement is something which depends a lot on availability of information which is there in public domain. When I say public, I mean it could be online or in books or in published literature. But when all of that stops, I think reverse engineering start. So Anup and me thought that why not we talk about such things. So today we both of us are here, and we are going to talk about the stuff that we have done in the last 10 years. I mean, at least a little bit of what we have done, if we are not able to cover all of them. So if you have any question in between, feel free to type it in the chat box. We would try to answer it in the end, but it could be, which I believe there are high chances we may exceed the time. So if that is the case, we are going to reply to your question through email, because we would know that you are the one who asked this question. So we'll send an answer to your email specifically. In case later on you come up with something that you want to ask, you can respond to my email, because most of the emails that you might have received for the invitation or for the calendar invite would be from my ID. So you can directly reply to any of that, and I can personally get back to you. So yeah, Anup, let's talk about reverse engineering. What do you think? There are so many things to talk about. What do you think, where we should start?
Yes. Hi everyone, and I'm delighted to be here with Deepak talking about reverse engineering. And as Deepak said, there's a lot of things in reverse engineering, and specifically, I personally feel more passionate about reverse engineering, and I love working on reverse engineering projects. And at GreyB, I've worked on a lot of reverse engineering projects. So I think uh, this is a good platform where we can share our experiences and observations with everyone. So, since there's a lot of things which we can discuss about, let me start with when you should go for reverse engineering. I think that's one question which would be there with a lot of people deciding like when is an appropriate time and when is an correct time when they should go for the reverse engineering. So, to answer this, let me share like in which situations you can go for the reverse engineering. So, on my slide are few cases, examples where we have done the reverse engineering. So the kind of projects where we have done the reverse engineering, reverse engineering kind of projects is licensing, transactions, buying and selling, even in the litigation. So this kind of studies are useful. Reverse engineering is useful in this kind of studies. And you can also go for reverse engineering if you want to prove non-infringement. In the later part of this, in the discussion, I will be sharing one example where we did reverse engineering to prove non-infringement. Then there are other kind of studies, acquisition of validity, where you can use reverse engineering. So this brings me to another question which people might be having, like, what's the advantage of when uh, reverse engineering should be done? So to answer this, what I feel is um, online literature search or public search, generally they are able to help us give a lead, but then there are situations where we get stuck and we are not sometimes not able to find a missing link which can help us establish the infringement. And in that cases, we have found reverse engineering have helped us a lot. Then there are cases where the technologies which we are dealing in, such as display or maybe you can say fabrication or semiconductors, the claims are such that the corresponding details are generally not available. And in those cases, too, reverse engineering can be an savior for you. And it goes without saying, like certain cases, you need certain sources or evidences which can be presented in the code. So that in such cases, also reverse engineering helps you identify sources which are hard to refute. So I think these are the major areas where we have done reverse engineering and have reverse engineering have helped us. And let me share one example or one reverse engineering study which we did, where we identified or we confirmed the infringement through reverse engineering. The case which I'm discussing or I want to share here is we worked on an OLED display, and we did the reverse engineering of the display to identify different layers within the display to help us confirm the infringement. Let me give you like this study we were doing to assist in a patent acquisition. One of our client had certain portfolio related to display, and he wanted to buy those patents. And before buying those patents, he wanted to make sure that those patents hadn't dead on read on certain products which he was particularly interested. And he wanted to buy those patents only when there isn't dead on read. So when we were working on the identifying the potential infringement on the product, in our public literature search, we were not able to establish the complete proof or complete evidences. And there was a time when we went and searched in the patent documents to see if their patent documents are disclosing something similar, which can give us certain lead. And that helped us. In patent literature, we got certain leads which were suggesting the similar technologies are used in the OLED display. So we shared those evidences with the client and got an go ahead for the reverse engineering, through which we can establish the proof. So Deepak, maybe I would give you a little background on what the technology was, which we were working on. So it was on different layers of an OLED, and we were particularly looking to identify this inorganic layer, which you can see on my screen, which was on the top, and we were trying to identify it in the product literature.
So just to confirm, Anu, basically, when you're saying inorganic layer, you meant to say that all the other layers or all the other claim elements you were able to identify through the product literature itself. This was the only thing that was missing, and you wanted to confirm through the test.
Yes, Deepak. So
okay.
The remaining layers we found in the public literature, and this inorganic layer we were not finding it. Although we got certain leads from the patent documents that similar layers should be existing in the product. But patent documents, as you know, they are not the evidences which you can submit in the code.
So I think this is an interesting point, because when you're saying you were able to identify the leads, because what I've seen is that such kind of studies are actually very comprehensive. That means they need a lot of effort and time to complete. And based on my experience of discussing with any of these stakeholder, nobody wants to spend that much of effort unless he's sure that he's going to, or not sure, but at least he has a positive signal that it is going to be worthwhile, or it's going to give a return. So I really like when you said that, through your initial research, you had a very positive indication that such kind of layer should be there in the product. And that's why, going ahead to the next step of performing the test could be fruitful. And I believe that wherever this logic is not that strong, it doesn't make sense to go to the next level. And when I say next level, that means going ahead to the next level in terms of product testing, tear down, and any of that stuff. So it's better off to stop here and just finish this study, because it doesn't make sense. It's like written on investment doesn't, it does not fit very well. So yeah, please continue. I just thought to share because it's an important element of, how you should decide if one should go ahead or not.
Yes, Deepak, you are absolutely correct. Even what we have found is generally, like, even our clients go for reverse engineering studies only when, as a last resort, like, so where you have searched through all public available literature and you are not able to establish the complete evidence of use. So, since these studies are a little time consuming, cost intensive, so it definitely makes sense only when you have a very good lead to pursue it. So the tools which we used were like, we use different tools to see the layers at a nanometer scale. So we use the tools like SCM, TAM, which help us in this kind of studies. SCM can help you get images to see the layers at a nanometer scale, and EDS kind of studies help you analyze the material composition. You can check which material compositions are like the layer is composed of. So these are the kind of tools which these were the tools which we used in this study. So what we were actually doing here was we were tearing down this display and making a cross section across and display a pixel to see what different layers are. So on the right hand side of the display where you can see those pixels individually. So we made a cross section, vertical cross section across the pixel to see the different layers. And this is how we did it. Like we zeroed down to an individual pixel, and we did the FIB cutting to prepare the sample there. And so these are the few images which we took during the sample preparation. So that will give you an idea like how we did prepare the cross section.
Yeah, interesting. I think specifically when the layers are involved, you have to figure out that, from where to cut so that you can see the clear cross section. I remember in one case, it took actually the whole week to figure out where to cut from, because when you are operating at such nano level, it takes a lot of time to just prepare the sample itself. Because sample is so small, you want to make sure that you have the right part of the product, uh, especially the part where you want to showcase that the claim elements would be existing. Because if you pick the wrong part, even if the technology is there in the product, you will end up concluding that it was not infringing. So sample preparation is like the most important step, along with the different tests that you have to conduct after the sample preparation part. So I can understand when you're showing that how to identify the pixel and then how to take a cross-sectional part of it. This looks to be easy mathematical way of looking at a particular portion, but I feel that when we go to nano and micro level, this takes a lot of time.
Correct, Deepak. So, Deepak, just to add to what you just shared, like sometimes even selecting the which pixel we should be making a cross section across, it was a little tricky task, because if you see on the screen where I'm pointing the mouse, you can see there are the pixels of different sizes, which are actually pixels corresponding to different colors. So during our study, we made a cross section across this pixel as well as the area between the two pixels to make sure that we are covering the every aspect during our study.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So with all the sample preparation and everything, like our final objective was to study those layers and see if we can find the layers which we are looking for. So the one which you see on my slide right now, you can see the different layers which we find in the product. We have so which the different layers which were needed. And on the right hand side, there's a little more zoomed version where you can see the more details about the each layers, and through which we confirm the different layers, and we studied their material, through which we were finally able to zero down like particular layer, like which layer it exactly is. So like whether it's an organic layer, inorganic layer. So by reading those material compositions, we were able to figure out the different layers, so which helped us identify the layers. Deepak, this process might appear like quite straightforward. However, when we are working on the reverse engineering, there's many times we come across challenges which are completely unexpected. I think you would agree here. Like you would even you while working on reverse engineering, you would have even came across similar situations, many situations where we hit an roadblock where we need to figure out ways like how we can move ahead. So
Yeah.
in this study too, we face some similar challenges, and I would particularly highlight few of those. The one was when we were preparing the sample. Since these layers are very delicate one, and they get easily delaminated or smudged by the heat. They were heat sensitive. So when we were preparing the sample, we were facing a lot of issues in preparing the sample because when you are doing the iron milling, the heat affects the layer. So this required us two, three iteration. With each iteration, we tried to control the heat so that we can get an appropriate sample which can be used in the study. There was another interesting thing which happened in this study. We to make sure that we do not leave any loose ends. We even took an help of an expert to cross confirm our observations. So this helped us. Like we were initially not able to find one layer, and like when we consulted with an expert, we were able to figure out the reason why it was not coming in our study. And like what we figured out was the image which you see on the right hand side, the top glass. So when we were initially making the samples, we were removing this glass as it was not a part of the layers which we wanted to study. But removing this glass was causing an effect on different layers like glue and touchscreen, which you can see below it. These layers, they were getting peeled off with the glass, and that's why it were not coming in our study. Like when we consulted with an expert, we got to know the reason why they are not coming in our study, and accordingly, like when we did the sample preparation along with the glass, we were able to see those layers too. So, Deepak, this was an example which we recently did, and I think like you would agree, like when we work on reverse engineering, like each experience is unique, and the kind of challenges we face are completely different.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Uh, I agree in that. And I think when you were talking about the semiconductor one, very weird examples were coming on my mind. I remember, I think maybe it was 3 years back or 4 years back when I think maybe four, when electric cars were getting very popular. At that time, we had to, we were working on a reverse engineering specifically on the um, battery operated cars because they were new in the market. Everybody knew that it's going to become big, and there were patents that came to us, and the infringement needs to be confirmed. And the process, the way we moved was very similar to what you showed in the semiconductor space, that we were able to identify most of the elements, but one was missing, and we had no idea how to figure that out because how the electric car functions. um, the car manufacturer were never going to tell anyone, right? So, and you can't actually open the car and see that what is happening inside. It's ideally a software that is doing everything within the car, how it's getting charged or how it's getting discharged, how it gets speed up, all of that stuff. So I still remember that we went to US, and we actually hired every electric car that was there in the market. So maybe I think there were like eight around at that point of time, and outside our hotel there was always like eight cars present. And since the electric car were very new, so everyone who used to pass by used to look at that, how from where these cars have come in. And we actually then connected our computer to those cars, and tried to understand that how the mechanism is going on internally, and measuring every small changes that are happening in the calculations that are going on, maintaining logs, and then doing all those different statistical analysis on this log to figure out what is happening, what is not. And that experience was pretty unique because we had to drive the car in various different test cases that we made, right? For example, going uphill, going downhill, going very fast, going very slow, and all different type of terrains to make sure that uh, we know that the internal functioning is happening exactly how the patent was talking about, irrespective of uh, how the driver is driving the car. So it was like, I think, 15 days of driving these 8 cars from morning to evening and sometime at the night, because you had to drive them fast. And it was thrilling as well as uh, very difficult at the same time, because we had no idea if we will be able to prove it in the end or not. But yeah, I think sitting inside the car with the computer in hand, connected with the car, was a never I imagined myself that I would be doing it. Uh, the happiness was that when we were able to prove the infringement, and the client made a lot of money on that. So that was pretty interesting. I'm sure if you have anything else you want to talk about, because all reverse engineering um, projects have something or the other uniqueness about them.
Yes, yes, exactly, Deepak. And that's why I have like included a lot of examples, a lot of cases where I have worked on in the slides, but I believe covering all those examples will be a bit difficult. Nonetheless, I want to cover few examples which I feel were quite exciting, and that's why there's another example which I wanted to share here, and it was on in reverse engineering which we did on an smartphone to study the communication between different components, and like how the signal communication is happening between the different components. For this, we studied the phone communication in detail. Like, first we tear down the product, identified the different components which were of interest to us, specifically the application processor, connector, and the display power management ICs. So I put up those in my slides, which you can see. So these were the few areas which we were targeting through this reverse engineering, which we wanted to specifically study. So we went through a lot of data sheets, manuals, repair manuals, and try to study those signals. And based on our like all those studies, we prepared a diagram which helped us relate how different signals are traveling and from where they are traveling. So the plot diagram which you see, they are specifically those areas along with the connections which we were interested in exploring. So for this, we tore down the product, the smartphone, completely identified different components, fingerprint sensor, motherboard, and display, specifically the connection points where the signal communication was happening. So, and that involved, like the study involved us testing a lot of points. There were nearly 23 points which we were trying to observe the signal communication. And it was a bit challenging task to connect all those points, because if you see, those are very difficult to in smartphone they are like very closely crammed, and it's very difficult to see those points. And what we were doing was we were making connections to those terminals or points and trying to get the signal and read those signals. So this all these signals we connected and tried reading through an oscilloscope. So these were the signals reading which we did and tried to compare, and there were the few unique challenges which we faced, which we overcame while working on the study. And specifically, I'm highlighting the two again here. The first one, again, the usual problem which we face while preparing and sample is either the IC or the terminals, or they get damaged due to the heating which is required to sometimes remove the components or shields. So this sometimes damages the ICs, and it makes the complete product non-functional. So we kept 2 3 smartphone with us when we were testing, so that if one of the device gets damaged. So we have other devices to continue this study. Another challenge was removing this mid frame from the display. And this generally removing those mid frame or the shielding is not required in a normal repairing situation, because these components are generally not touched when you are doing a normal phone repair. So that's why it was a bit challenging removing the mid frame and those shieldings. Even one thing which happened was when we were doing the testing, we had the three samples and we were left with the last sample which we were doing the testing. And that sample too, we faced a little hiccup, in a sense like its touch panel got damaged when we prepared the sample, and it became irresponsive. So we are not able to touch and use the phone. Now, since this was the last sample with us, and we ordered and we got the samples from US, and when we were doing the testing, getting the other samples we needed certain time. So we thought of making the use of that sample, and we came up with a creative solution of making the touch work again. And it was, we used a mouse, we connected it through an OTG cable, and we were able to use we were able to bypass the touch screen and make and operate the smartphone basically. So these are few of the problems which, yeah, sometimes you come across completely unexpected, and sometimes in creative solution help us address those things.
Yeah,
So
I agree, Anup, on this particular part, because um, I've seen that it is this such kind of analysis depends more on the grit of the person, because every step as you move ahead in such kind of task or projects, something new comes up, and there is no ready-made solution that is available online, and giving up appears to be much easier. So I think the grit is like a very important skill, I would say, apart from the technical part. Just technically superior, sufficient, I mean, good is not sufficient. Somehow you have to be a good hustler to reach to the end stage. So I think this challenges gives a very good idea that especially I think in the case where you gave an example, I remember, because the test was we performed on a very old version of the device. That means the devices that were launched 5 years back or 10 years back, it's not easy to get those kind of devices at this time. And when you have um, limited number of devices that are available, you can't afford to lose one device if it is non-functioning, or if it gets spoiled up while doing the test. You have to figure out how to still make it work, or you have to figure out that how to find a solution if one thing is not working. So I think it's good that you also talked about such challenges, which sometimes people don't get to see, because what they see is the start and what they see is the end, not something in the between part. So yeah, good part that you covered these.
So these are the two examples which, somewhere like we have recently worked on. There are a lot more examples which we can continue talking about, but I think our time will not permit to us to cover all those examples. But there's one example which I want to specifically share, which where we've worked. And since those examples which we talked so far, they are related to semiconductor and fabrication. I want to also share an example where we worked on a software, like software kind of thing, where we have done the reverse engineering or product testing. And it was basically analyzing a text to speech engine. And what we were trying to figure out was how text to speech engine work based on the placement of that word within a sentence. So how that thing affects the pronunciation of that word. So we made a lot of test cases, run those test cases, observe what output we were getting. We analyzed those audio prints and compared, like analyze those audio print using the different audio analysis tool, speech analysis tool, and by comparing those speech fingerprints or audio prints, we were able to make conclusions on the project. So this was a completely other type of reverse engineering which we did, and that helped us help our client prove the infringement.
Yeah, I think
So
this may, when we say such kind of in software reverse engineering, technically, I mean, when we say technically, we are not actually reverse engineering the software, because sometimes you may have to get inside the code and then figure out that what part of the code may be doing the same function. This is more of, as you said, the creative way of understanding what might be happening inside without going inside a software. And the interesting part here is there's sometimes you don't need to actually um, tear down even in the software part also. I remember that we worked on uh, one, I think it was a long time back. There was one particular, and it was not for patent infringement. The case was where one software was supposed to be, built by copying the code from the other, and uh, and this was a challenge to prove that yes, it has been copied. And we had no code at that point of time for the tool. So initially, the part that was thought about is that um, let's decompile the executive file, and then we will be able to figure out what was the code, and we can go through it and study it and then prove that it was copied. And it was a very long process, and the obvious first idea that anyone will think of is this only. But we thought that there could be some other way as well. And I remember I tried to install that software on my system, and I tried to start playing with it, and I figured out that there were some particular reactions that were coming from that software whenever I used to click in a certain way, like how sometimes the bug appears. And uh, and I thought that this is not something that would be designed. It's a bug. And then I installed the original, software also, and tried to replicate the same thing, and it had the same bug. And that was like very fascinated. We had not even started working on that project, and I was just playing with it to build the proposal. I mean, the methodology. And this initial reaction was so promising that we built the whole process of proving the initial overlap just based on the UX, or user experience perspective, rather than going inside the code. The good part was that our we were able to collect so many bugs that were common between the two, exactly similar, that the code mapping was not at all required. That was enough, sufficient to say that that there was the same code behind the two softwares. So when we were initially discussing that there could be such kind of studies are require a lot of effort and time, I think that it very much depends. Sometimes there could be such solution which actually do not require for you to tear down or for you to go to a code level. Sometimes we can do these creative things to prove what is happening inside. And I think this was also a good example that you gave.
yes, Deepak, I think it makes sense. So um, I think we have covered quite few examples, and there are a lot more in my slides, but I think we'll not be able to cover those.
Yeah, yeah. It is like, asking a person to talk about his favorite topics. It goes endless. And I can understand the same thing, that, you would like to talk about everything that you worked on, but it's not possible. But yeah, I guess based on the reaction, we can have another session sometime later, and we can um, at least take one example of each type in that one. But as of now, I think let's close it. And there are few questions, but I think let's answer those questions also over the email. It would be good for everyone. Anyway, thank you, Anu, for sharing some of your experience, and thank you everyone for attending it. Make sure you can, if you have any question, you can, you have the email. Otherwise, there's a lot of information that we have given on our blog. You can read about it. We believe a lot on sharing. rather than just keeping it with us. So you'll find a very informative stuff that we write on our blog. You can go over there and read about it. Thank you very much for attending it. Have a nice day. Bye bye.
Thank you, everyone.